Well, we are about to conclude this Creative Summit, as it's called, is a Explore Fedrigoni event. So I'm really happy to call on stage the CEO of the whole group, Fedrigoni, Marco Nespolo. Welcome on stage. We're gonna be, looking at some of the topics that we have already discussed together with the other guests and speakers from a broader perspective. And I would first like to start with you from just a comment on so much we have seen and been through today. So what will you bring home with you?
Well, a lot of hints, a lot of ideas, I think, first of which is one more testament to how this ecosystem that we have the privilege of being part of for our, let's say, small bit is so rich and exciting, of course, with challenges and with a lot of opportunities. So hearing from the very different angles that can come into play that we try to catalyze in this room and on stage is always exciting, and so we take notes and go home with a lot of call for actions for our future developments. But what about you? You've been leading the show super effectively for the whole day. So what are you taking out of these sessions?
Well, I was thinking about this because I've been through so much as a journalist. I mean, so many topics that might be really explored more. What, in a way, surprised me is to see what a different type of public you managed to gather here today. And so the insights that the different speakers brought on stage were extremely, extremely different because they are coming from different countries, and every country has a different perspective, even though it's a globalized world, etc. So this was one thing that I think is really, really treasurable from today. The second thing is to see that sustainability has still its place, because in nowadays world where we see a lot of step backwards on certain topics that the United States are not embracing as they used to in the past, they still are relevant, topics like sustainability, because people care. So this is a very important lesson that we bring with us today. And speaking of the States, Marco, the CNN today was putting on the first homepage, they were talking of a limbo that we are all living through thanks to Trump's tariff war and the indecisions that are made in the States, more than the decisions sometimes. So we live through uncertain times, and it's no news in the sense that since you are CEO of the Fedrigoni Group, it's always been uncertainty that has guided the world. At the same time, you managed to not only go on with the survival mode, but grow, make the company, the group, grow, evolve. So how do you do that when everything around you seems uncertain?
Yeah, apart from saving some prayers every night for how big of the next shock should be, no, but jokes apart, I think we all learned over the last 5-6 years about what shocks means after decades or centuries of stability. So we started, as far as we are concerned, as you mentioned, the last stint of Fedrigoni life, and for the last several years of what this ecosystem has gone through. We started with COVID after a century of nothing anywhere close to it. Then on the rebound, there was a big supply chain crisis that hit this industry big time, and that we had to cope with. And then on the back of it, we had even a war in Europe, in the Western world, and a subsequent energy shock, which also is pretty relevant for our ecosystem. On the back of it, we saw inflation, and I never saw inflation in my professional career because it was like 3-4 decades, and even interest rates were zero or negative for 1.5 decade, and all of a sudden you had to cope with all of these inflationary shocks, and therefore the countermeasures, which were, of course, restrictive monetary measures, increasing interest rates, and other, again, countermeasure to fight inflation, which became triggers for a macro slowdown. So we don't remember over the last 5-6 years, probably more than 1 month or two without a big challenge and a big shock. So just to say that I think we all recognize and need to acknowledge that big uncertainty and volatility is a new norm. So how to cope with that, I think, depending on where you are, in which industry you play, but I think generally speaking, I think is about one, if you have the right support, financial means and capital structure, is to use the shocks and find ways through M&A to get opportunities. Normally during shocks, I mean, the weaknesses emerge and you can attack, or new opportunities arise and you can jump on them if you're quick, and again, inorganically so. But then organically, I think that it's basically twofold. One, and again, running the risk of using two buzzwords, but one is building resilient business models, which means a lot of things, but to summarize, I humbly think it's creating optionality and again, diversification in your footprint, so where you produce and where you sell. Second is building resiliency and optionality and diversification in your supply chain, including supply base. And then last and not the least, in my opinion, also add segment exposure beyond your core, so to, again, get diversification and more optionality to play with the shocks, both as a countermeasure and again as compensating good surprises with bad surprises, or de-risking exposure to some specific verticals. That's what we tried and do at Fedrigoni over the last several years. The second angle to cope with uncertainty and try to still grow, I think, is about agility. Again, another buzzword, but rather than a buzzword, I would consider that more of a system that you need to try and evolve. Again, easier said than done, again, but it's about the processes, how you manage your processes, your decision making in the company, your functions and evolve of your organization, and how you create, of course, the culture and build the talent to nurture that, and how you structure your decision making with the right antennas, again, provided that no one can predict the future these days, but at least the faster you are in anticipating or capturing through the right antennas, most of which outside of the company, the signals, and the faster you can adapt to that. Of course, accepting mistakes, but being able to course correct soon. I think if I think about the last 5 years at Fedrigoni, the most relevant achievements were done through these, but also the mistakes I regret the most, where we lacked the ability, despite we got bigger and therefore in theory more and less agile. We were not able to listen in full the ecosystem around us and decide accordingly and fast enough. So
but when you grow big, it's less easy to be flexible, for sure. But that's part of your strategy, right? To grow, continue growing, and stay competitive. And this is the second question I had for you, Marco, because it's true that you are present all over the world nowadays, but at the same time, your DNA is still Italian, and the Italian market has certain specificities that the French market shares, partially, thinking about the crowd that we have here from Paris, which is a very high tax pressure, and also, and this is different from France, very high cost for energy. You quoted the energy issue as one of the many issues that you're confronting with. So how do you manage to stay competitive working in the manufacturing field with those elements that you have to deal with?
I mean, you mentioned a number of drivers that makes the Italian ecosystem less competitive, especially when it comes to manufacturing industries. You mentioned energy. I mean, I remind this group that in Italy we have the cost of energy is more than twice as high as US, almost twice as high as France, so Europe, and 30% higher than Germany, for example, and in between, Spain sits in between Germany and France. We also have a decently heavy fiscal ecosystem, especially when it comes, but not only, when it comes to labor cost. And I think we share with Europe, to your point, or most of Europe, another not irrelevant aspect driving productivity down or enabling far less productivity growth than some other places in the world, which is a super rigid labor market, which again has been probably the single largest contributor of such a big gap in productivity between, for example, US and Europe. So if you manufacture in Italy, I think, well, first of all, if you have the scale, and you should build the scale, you should diversify and get less heavy on Italy and have more optionality to the risk and the average your costs, broadly speaking. But again, sticking to Italian production, running the risk of stating the obvious, I think the first and bare minimum is to be religious in creating cost efficiencies through investments and through, of course, distinctive capabilities, continuously sharpening the pencil on sourcing and production processes, especially on the cost drivers that are the least friendly in Italy. For example, in our industry, energy is relevant. We've done a lot on energy consumption and energy efficiency, also for, of course, and even more relevantly for ESG angles, but also for cost angles. But that's, in my opinion, barely enough and not always enough. The most relevant aspect, again, in our humble opinion, is to get out of the wrong battles and avoid fighting the battles that you will never win, i.e. going premium, going in segments where either costs are less relevant, obviously so, or distinctive either know-how or craftsmanship or technology can be evolved, and where Italy can make the difference or be at par with the leaders. So that's not by chance that I think you don't have mass market automotive in Italy any longer. You don't have white good industry, mass market white good industry any longer, while you have like the Brembos in automotive components, the Ferraris, to state the obvious, and even again in our very small area or angle, we've tried to clean portfolio from the more commodity side of the story, and premiumize as much as possible, focusing on, again, where value is more relevant than pure cost competition. So I think that's the only way for someone willing to produce in Italy and some European countries. It's the only way to go forward. Delocalize and premiumize.
You know that the principle, choose your battles. Like you cannot win on every level, so you have to pick the battles that you can actually win. And here comes my following question that is very related to battles and strategies, which is related to the AI. I mean, it's a big question mark on all businesses' strategies currently, how to deal with this new technology that is still developing, so totally uncertain. Going back to the first question on that. And at the same time has an enormous potential. So it could make us, as any business win all of its fights or lose all of its fights. There's also another dimension to the problem or to the opportunity, which is HR related, meaning that AI could make a lot of jobs obsolete and at the same time could reinforce a lot of jobs. A lot of companies are struggling to find appropriate people to hire with those skills related to AI. So I'm asking you, where does AI fit in Fedrigoni's strategy for the future? How are you dealing with it currently, and how will it affect the people that work for you?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, it needs to fit into anyone's strategy, because I think it's already well beyond imaginable until recently, and will create significant changes no matter what. So not looking at that and understanding your way around it or with that, I don't think is an option. Having said that, I think the businesses can be clustered at least between those that can be potentially fully disrupted or fully enhanced by AI itself. And I don't think Fedrigoni business model fits into that. And those that will have a super relevant material impact through AI, and either you leverage that and stay competitive, or you don't and get out of market, or jeopardize significantly your competitive position. So I think, provided we do believe, at least for time being and not knowing what we don't know, that we are in the second bucket, how do we try and deal with that again? Learning every day, I think, is a bit twofold. One is a bit broader, i.e. just opening up to it and enabling the utilization unstructured, so to say, to some extent, to our population. So as we speak, we have our own internal, so to say, instance or environment where we can use AI, putting all of our data in, but also keeping that for us and adding with external, let's say, powers. And that is already pretty helpful, despite it's not a breakthrough yet, on content creation, translation, for example. Very simply, so we sell and therefore develop catalogs into 50 plus countries. So just translation, content creation, like technical data sheets development, and even comparison of those against customers is clearly enhanced. But again, we don't know what we don't know, so it's just about letting people use it for their own jobs, the normal ones, so to say, and then see where it brings. And I just mentioned one or two very simple use cases, but already decently helpful. But then, more relevantly, so I would say, is select a few battles to fight where really you see a use case that is really bringing value soon, tailored for what you need. So in our specific example, the first big move has been very recent, and it's been on supply chain management for one of the three business units, the biggest and most complex, self-adhesive, where basically our IT infrastructure with many acquisitions done is particularly complex, and therefore the whole kind of flows of raw materials in so many plants and continents through our inventory, and then through our production scheduling of different steps, and then warehouses, is very complex, trying to oversimplify a bit. So that, both in terms of inventory management, forecast accuracy, service level, therefore, we saw a huge opportunity, and we decided to, bet on it through a partnership that we recently signed with probably the best player with this specific angle, combining, and I'm not an expert, so I'm probably using some simple words like data integration and making sense of data, despite when super complex, to take decisions, and also enhance all of the above with AI. And our partner, and I think they're here today, by the way, like many other partners, is Palantir. So we just started, and they are with us helping on this specific use case. But once in, I like to think sky is the limit, and it's on us to be super disciplined into focusing the next application, or differently said, the next use case, where the biggest value is tomorrow, and then move from there. That's when it comes to how it fits into our strategy. So I like to think we will soon have a step change into service levels, forecast accuracy, hence cash management and working capital management, but also, of course, cost and efficiencies by using that just with this use case. And then we'll ramp it up to many others, I'm sure. And we are getting structured in terms of organization and capabilities to support it. Now, talking people, or to answer your question on people, I mean, I do believe it will be a much bigger change than we might think. In the first place, a huge dislocation between jobs that are not necessary any longer and the new skills that are growing. So net, I believe that we need to acknowledge that in the very short term, if I even just think about use cases that are more mature, at least in our, for what we can see, I mean, is a net minus. So there will be some activities that will just be much better done by AI, by the agents. I mean, think about funneling email through customer service. Think about matching orders, checking stocks availability and summarizing them, let alone forecasting and demand planning, just touching the closest that we touch today. So a lot of jobs will be done by AI, and some of them will allow higher quality time for resources, if properly evolved, to do a bit of the same job but higher content, and then new skills will be required and developed. But again, especially in some industries, I think the net, I mean, honestly, we are looking, just to be brutally clear, we are looking at decent savings in automation. That's just the truth. And but again, looking at the positive, of course, it unleashes resources to reinvest and do better on the rest of the job profiles, and also will require and trigger, I think, a pretty exciting upskilling and reskilling within the organizations to really get acquainted first, and then accelerating later adoption and results from AI.
Yeah, maybe also organize information inside companies to create those talents that you need in the AI field. Once again, it's about adaptation and flexibility from what you tell us. I was, by the way, thinking about an event I moderated yesterday. Well, I did an interview to the engineer, director engineer of Google Cloud.
Yeah, I read.
We discussed AI, and he told me something that might be really interesting to the businesses present here, which is that the AI is evolving also on the tactile field. So very big research is being done in the States on how to insert AI on tactile studies. So it's gonna be something that you can command and interact with, not just through words and through writing, but also through pressure, touch, and a lot of other physical systems that it's very hard even to imagine for me currently, but apparently it's a thing already, and it's gonna probably change the future for many businesses that are very much oriented on the, you know, on the physical side, like we said, like for paper, how important it can be to have a certain feeling when you touch a certain type of paper, etc., etc. Anyway, it's going to be interesting to follow up. Yes. Coming to sustainability, Marco, another of the key topics of today. You told us how ESG is relevant to your strategy to remain competitive, to meet consumers' interests, first of all. And also how it could be modified and made more accessible through technology. So tell us more, some maybe example case studies from your experience that you can share on how you help luxury brands in their journey towards sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, and again, many experts already touched upon that. I think the point about sustainability not being an option any longer is just a must. Consumers push for that. Investors, therefore, I would say, push for that. So no matter whether you want to sell more or raise capital, you need to be complying with best practices in that. But that's, broadly speaking, I think the bare minimum. And of course, we have done a serious roadmap on that front, also attracting external rating agencies to kind of certify that we comply with the best standards. And a lot in our industry has to do with CO2 emissions, and we have a very serious and actually faster than targeted plan to get carbon neutral in a couple of plants. By the way, heavy on luxury packaging materials in 2 years, so well ahead of what let's say science-based target would suggest. So, but that's just, I mean, the bare minimum, I would say, to be serious about that and stay in business. On top of it, for us, given what we do and the partners we have to do it for, I mean, sustainability is the difference between being distinctive and having a competitive edge and being irrelevant. If you think about packaging sustainability, which we heard a lot about, I mean, what we do is decently relevant in terms of not just the ESG performance or sustainability performance of what we deliver, but of what that is used for and or on what it goes. If you think about the label, so it's not just about being carbon neutral in our plant, working a lot with our suppliers to kind of scope 2 and 3 down the value upstream the value chain and actually co-develop. And again, there's also several partners in the room that, for example, on the pulp side, work with us very seriously to enable us to be better again in what we do and in our process. But then, even more so, is downstream. So what is the impact of what we do downstream? Of course, with paper packaging is pretty clear, and I think we already covered in prior discussions, and that inspired our investment and partnership with Papcode. We do believe that could make a step change into plastic to paper and into packaging, real deep, serious packaging sustainability, which per se would be a big change for us and potentially enable even beyond our scope big developments for the industry in general, but for us as Fedrigoni, of course, in particular. But again, if you think about, but there's more than that. I mean, the features of our labels, for example, that are related to the chemicals, the adhesives, or the liners, and we touched upon before, and the content of the label itself, of course, determine what happens and the level of recyclability and sustainable performance of the product that they go on. So think about wash-off adhesive to enable bottle recycling. Think about monomateriality in labels versus the packaging that they go onto to make the whole packaging recyclable. And for example, wet wipes is one application that we developed to have like monomaterial open-close labels to make the whole packaging recyclable. So recycling liners, upcycling both fibers or other materials is the name of the game. So we necessarily and proudly do our best, humbly so, to evolve features and also reconciling dilemmas that Claudia alluded to before. I mean, provided there's no other option than being more sustainable, doing that efficiently without compromising and again for this audience, I think very relevant, the kind of the visual and the look and feel, but also at cost-effective and cost-efficient level is, I think, can be done, should be done, and that's what we try and do. With again, with also through our innovation efforts in our R&D centers, and even more importantly, as said before, like opening up, because we do believe, and that's been said before, that innovation to kind of be at the forefront cannot be done by corporations internally, with very few exceptions. So you need to humbly open up and recognize that, I mean, what we've tried to do in a few instances, and PAPCO is one, to a very different level of development, was our super exciting journey started in 2022 with Tageos, with a different angle, but was along the same lines. What is next that we can offer synergistic to what we do, to kind of this ecosystem that is a growth engine for us, is synergistic to the rest of the business, and is, again, setting us as far as possible apart from competitors on what matters.
Thank you very much, Marco, for sharing your insights with us. I think it was extremely illuminating and insightful for everybody. I don't know if you have a last word to say to them before champagne and networking comes in.
Of course, you never want to be in between I mean, the meeting and the champagne and the party. No, I just want to thank everyone. I mean, first of all, you, Chiara, you had a great leadership in our day, and did drive us through all the relevant content. So
thank you very much,
an
Marco.
applause
That's
to
very
you.
kind.
Of course, to all the other super relevant contributors to this to the content part of this event, so all the speakers today, of course the jury for the top award. Again, it's been very relevant to be able to bring them all together and hopefully deliver content that was providing hints, ideas, or even just emotions on what we do every day, each of us in different roles in this exciting ecosystem. Of course, a thank to the Fedrigoni team that made this happen, organizing all of that, and also those that every day around the globe, more than 6,000 of us are working with passion to, again, do our bit with humble ambition with all of you, again on the shop floor, and even more importantly, of course, all of you in terms of customers, partners, that, I mean, without your trust, continued trust, we wouldn't be here, and without your suggestions and your raising the bar, we wouldn't, I mean, stay honest with our ambition to kind of be better and better every day. So we, as Fedrigoni, really feel privileged in being part of such a diversified, complex, exciting, quickly evolving, at times challenged ecosystem. Again, and we want to do it forever, more and more with all of you, trying to earn your trust and stick to our promises every single day. So thanks for joining us, and being on our side, and we will be on your side with 100% and more of our possibilities. So thanks for joining, and enjoy the rest of the evening with us.
Thank you, Marco. It's been quite a love declaration. Thank you very much. Just to tell you that, of course, there is a party, there is food, there is champagne, but there are also extremely exceptional projects that you can see on the upper floor. So don't forget to have a look to the winners of the top awards, because it's really, really worth it. Enjoy your evening. Thank you again.
Thanks, John.